What if you were told that Osama bin Laden wrote a letter to America in 2002? Welcome to the Curious Culture Club, where we unravel the untold stories of our world. In the aftermath of the September 11th attacks in 2001, the world was in shock. The name Osama bin Laden became synonymous with fear, terror, and a profound sense of loss. Yet, in the midst of this tumultuous time, bin Laden penned a letter to America in 2002. This was not just a letter, but a manifesto, a declaration of intent, and a chilling insight into the mind of one of the most infamous figures of the 21st century. To fully understand the significance of this letter, we must first transport ourselves back to the early 2000s. The Twin Towers had just fallen, and the world was grappling with the reality of a new kind of warfare, a war against an unseen enemy. The United States, under the leadership of President George W. Bush, was preparing to launch an invasion into Afghanistan, marking the beginning of the war on terror. This was the backdrop against which bin Laden wrote his letter. The letter itself was a complex blend of religious discourse, political critique, and chilling threats. Bin Laden sought to justify the attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, using religious texts to back his claims. His words painted a picture of a global jihad, a holy war against the West. He also expressed strong anti-Israel sentiments and issued a stern warning to Americans. But what were Osama bin Laden's motivations behind this letter? Was it merely a declaration of war, or was there more to it? The letter was filled with demands and conditions, outlining a vision for a world reshaped in accordance with his beliefs. We are about to delve into the hidden depths of this infamous letter, revealing lesser-known details that might just change your perspective. As we explore the language and rhetoric used by bin Laden, we will seek to understand the man behind the monster and the message that still echoes today. Stay tuned as we decode Osama's message, what you didn't know from the 2002 letter. The 2002 letter from Osama bin Laden was not just a message, but a declaration of his motivations and beliefs. It's a window into the mind of one of the most infamous figures in recent history. One of the most prominent points in the letter was bin Laden's justification for the attacks. He claimed retaliation for what he saw as American aggression in the Middle East, particularly in Iraq and Palestine. This was a theme that he revisited frequently in his messages, painting a picture of a defensive jihad against perceived Western imperialism. Religion, too, played a significant role in his narrative. Bin Laden invoked the teachings of Islam to justify his actions, arguing that they were in response to violations of Islamic law by America and its allies. This was a contentious point, as many scholars and believers vehemently disagreed with his interpretation and use of religious texts. Then, there were his demands and conditions. Bin Laden called for the complete withdrawal of American forces from all Muslim countries, the end of support for Israel, and the cessation of what he termed as American interference in the affairs of the Muslim world. His call for a global jihad was a rallying cry to Muslims around the world, urging them to unite and resist against what he described as the oppression of the West. This was part of his broader strategy to galvanize a global Islamic resistance movement. Finally, his anti-Israel stance was a key element of his rhetoric. Bin Laden criticized America's support for Israel, linking it to the suffering of Palestinians and framing it as a key factor in his campaign against the United States. While the key points convey a clear message, there are underlying details that escape the naked eye. These subtleties, hidden within the folds of his rhetoric, offer further insights into bin Laden's worldview and the broader geopolitical landscape of the time. But that's a story for our next scene. Every word in Osama's letter was chosen with care, each carrying a weight beyond its surface meaning. The text is riddled with references and allusions that may not be immediately apparent. For instance, there are subtle mentions of specific events and incidents that might not be widely known, but were significant in shaping the narrative of global jihad. The letter also gives us an insight into Al-Qaeda's broader strategy. While the organization's violent approach was clear, the letter hinted at a deeper ideological battle, a struggle for hearts and minds. Osama bin Laden was not just waging a physical war, he was also engaged in a war of ideas. Interestingly, the letter wasn't addressed to America as a whole. Specific individuals and groups within the US were directly addressed, underscoring the calculated nature of Osama's message. He was not speaking to a faceless entity, but to particular segments of American society. There are also signs of the intellectual influences that shaped Osama's worldview. His letter draws on a range of ideological sources, from religious texts to political treatises, revealing a complex interplay of ideas that fueled his convictions. What's more, the letter anticipates reactions and responses from the Muslim world. Osama bin Laden was keenly aware of the delicate balance of power within the Muslim world, and his letters sought to tap into existing sentiments and frustrations. These hidden details, these layers of meaning, reveal a more nuanced picture of Osama bin Laden's motivations and the geopolitical climate of the time. They take us beyond the headline-grabbing acts of violence and into the psychological warfare that was being waged. The letter, while a chilling reminder of the past, is also a stark reflection of the then geopolitical landscape. The world has changed since 2002, but how much of Osama's message still resonates today? We're 2 decades distanced from the time when Osama bin Laden penned his open letter to America. The geopolitical landscape has transformed in ways unimaginable then. The Middle East, once a chessboard for international powers, has seen the rise and fall of terrorist groups, civil wars, and democratic uprisings. Yet some issues bin Laden highlighted persist. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict continues, albeit under different dynamics. The question of Western intervention in Muslim countries remains debated. His call for global jihad, while largely dismissed by the majority of the Muslim world, still finds echoes in the corners of extremism. This exploration into Osama's 2002 letter to America has not only shed light on the past, but also provoked thought about the present and future. Remember, history is not just about dates and events, but understanding the motivations and messages behind them.